This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening. This is open meeting of the Town of Auburn Fire Station Building Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirements of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a public accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, 1-408-650-3123 and access code 235-235-861, or the public can join via computer at https://globalgotomeeting.com, join 235235861. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available at the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. That's it.
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the formulation of this committee. We had Glenn open up the meeting because we currently do not have a chair and a vice chair. And without knowing what each individual can bring to the table and what level of participation you would like to get involved in terms of leadership role on the committee, I would suggest that either this committee can take a vote tonight to assign a chair and a vice chair. I don't know if you're prepared to do that, or we could carry that over until the next meeting. I just want to ask that everyone get sworn in by the town clerk. I appreciate that. So let me just give you a brief overview as to the purpose of this committee. We reconstituted a new fire headquarters committee as a result of the Joint Public Safety Committee being dissolved. And it was dissolved for a number of reasons. Number one, the cost of the joint facility was too costly, and there was no appetite to move forward with that. So there was a refocus on the priority of what is needed, and right now a fire headquarters only is supported by the Board of Selectmen, with the potential of some growth at that current site where Chuck's formerly stood, for a police component or a separate building down the road. I think the perception is that this project has already been approved, and that is not correct. So there were several hurdles that we have to clear. The first one was we brought forward a warrant article, brought it before a town meeting, that allowed us to purchase the Chuck's property for consideration of a fire headquarters. We've always contended that the public should weigh in on a project of this size, because we have the ability to do it through the tax levy if we wanted to, but we wanted some public buy-in. It's their tax dollars. They should have a deciding decision on the future of a fire headquarters. That being said, we still have to go to the voters for a debt exclusion vote, hopefully in May, and also town meeting would have to approve the authorization to borrow the money. So there are two additional levels of approval before this project can go forward. Your job is to decide the concept that will be presented by Tecton, given your input, the size of the facility, the layout of the facility, while considering potential growth for any facility that we should build. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're going to build a facility and outgrow it in 10 years. We have to provide for future growth. So you're going to get some guidance in terms of Tecton. and what level of experience you can bring to the table in terms of deciding how that facility should be built. It's important that we inform the public of any decision that's going to go forward. We have an open meeting. It's being televised. We want our citizens to participate when necessary, because it's their building as well. So we encourage public participation. So to the best that you can, if you can inform your constituents of what's going on here, it's going to make it a lot easier when we are prepared to bring it to town meeting and to get a positive vote to move this forward project. So that's what I wanted to lay out to you initially. I know the chief has some items he'd like to discuss with you as well, but we're here to help you out, and hopefully this can be a success, and we can get a successful vote at town meeting. So with that, Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich. I just want to take a minute just to thank all the committee members for stepping up and serving in this very important role. It's truly appreciated, and we were actually very impressed with the quality and the caliber of candidate that we received to be on the committee, which is one of the reasons why the group is a little larger than most committees, because everybody brought some piece of experience and expertise, and we didn't want to stifle or limit that. So as the manager said, and we had talked about it today, because maybe some of you, we may not even all know each other. I know some of you I know, many I'm just meeting for the first time, and I'm sure you're in the same boat. So, our recommendation wouldn't be that you take action tonight on a chair. We're not doing anything tonight that's going to require a vote. Other than just setting a next meeting date, but again, that doesn't necessarily require a vote. So we're comfortable with just kind of moving forward, with sort of an open discussion tonight, and then maybe over the next couple of weeks, our recommendation would be, we have a lot of work to do in somewhat of a short period of time if we're trying to put a package and a proposal together for May. So we would suggest maybe bi-weekly meetings moving forward, but that's something that the committee can discuss. But maybe you want to take a beat for a couple of weeks and think about whether or not somebody wants to serve in a leadership role and maybe seek a nomination from somebody. So we would suggest that you do that at the next meeting versus putting pressure on tonight of filling chair roles when really we don't know each other. So with that said, I'd like to start. I'll start, and then kind of just go around the room and everybody introduce yourself, not only to the committee, but to the public. Again, as Chris said, we'll talk directly into the microphone so people can hear us on the playback. But just talk to us a little bit about, what you do as an occupation and the value as you expressed on your application, what you bring to this committee. And I think everybody, by the time we get to the other end, will see that we've really assembled a pretty great group of people here. So again, for those that I've just met tonight, my name's Steve Coleman. I serve as the chief of the Fire Rescue Department. I've been in Auburn close to 20 years. I've served as the chief for the past 13. So I'm really excited. We've been working on this project in one variation or another over the past 6 years, and very excited to kind of get to this new chapter and see if we can get this over the hump. I do have some information that we'll share with you tonight just to kind of bring you up to speed. One of the things that I just wanted to kind of say is that I'm not interested in going backwards tonight in history. If you've been following this project, maybe you know some of the details. If you're interested to know how we got to this point over the last 6 years, I'd be more than happy at another time to kind of share with you all the details of that. But I'm really looking forward tonight to move this project forward. Now that we've secured land, we have a new committee, I want to look towards the future. But I'm certainly available at any time to talk about the past and sort of how we got to this point. And I have a few documents that I'm sure will become a topic of discussion tonight that we'll hand around when appropriate, but we'll get to those later. So Next, I'd like to introduce Jeff from Tecton Architects.
Good evening. Jeff McElravy, principal with Tecton Architects out of Hartford. The background story here is I've been doing public safety architecture for 37 years now. I stopped counting well past 100, probably 200 or so facilities that we completed at this point. I've been with Tecton, let's see, I think I'm coming on 17 or 18 years right now. I did 20 years with another firm where I did public safety before that. And I've been working with the town of Auburn for a little while now. And it hasn't been 6 years, really, has it? Man. Apparently for 6 years now. So I'm excited to be here and see where we take this new task and hopefully do something exciting that really meets the expectations of not only this committee but the community in general. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Town Manager Ed Kazanovich. I've been serving as Town Manager since January of 2023. I've been with Auburn roughly 30 years. I've had a 40-year career in local government, and it's a long time, so I guess I'm showing my age. But there are several different projects that I am proud to say that I was part of, and I'd like to think that this is going to be one of them. So I think we need to make sure that we push this over the goal line, provided we have the support of the general public. I think it's our obligation to make sure that we have a first-class facility for our fine firefighters who do a great job every day. And I also like to introduce Dory Vecchio. She's the assistant town manager. She's unfortunately, we didn't have a chair up here for her, but Dory's been with us for a year and a half. She also has 20-plus years of municipal experience, former town administrator in Blackstone. She's the assistant town manager. She came on board about a year and a half ago. She's also our HR director, and she's going to be very instrumental in seeing this project through as well.
My name is Matthew Ruffley, Precinct 5. I live on Waterman Road. I'm also a town meeting member. Currently, I work for the UMass University System and UITS Technology Infrastructure and Data Storage. I also have 20 years of experience as a chef, so I might have some input on how to design the kitchen. My wife is on the select board, so I'm very, very familiar with the process that's been involved up to this point, since I don't think I've missed watching a select board meeting in 4 years now.
Hi, my name's Scott Kittredge. I've lived in town for about 22 years, the west side on Hill Street. I do commercial construction since 1998. I've done numerous public projects. I've done a fire station, police station in the past. I was just hoping that my knowledge could help bring something to the table for everybody on that end.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Steele. I'm a captain with the fire department for over 20 years. I'm a town resident for over 20 years. I'm in charge of facilities and maintenance for the fire rescue department. I also have a background in site development for about 10 years.
Hi, I'm Chris Pierce. I'm also on the fire department, been on for just under 20 years. I live in town for the past 10. I'm just hoping to, give some insight and help with this project, working on the fire department. Have worked in both stations, currently out of West Street, and hopefully I can just be helpful. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Heather Fortunato. I lived in town for probably about 24 years now. I am a master plumber. I work for Grzeski Plumbing. I'm a project manager. We do this work. This is what we do. We do commercial work, some file bid work. We actually did the middle school. When the middle school was built, I was the PM then. And I was just recently involved in the construction of the Northbridge Fire Station. So I thought that I would have some helpful knowledge to bring to the table.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Kennedy. My career is I'm a lieutenant with the Massachusetts State Police. I've been with the State Police for 24 years. Was a municipal police officer of the town of Oxford for 5 years. during that time, I had my EMT certificate for 17 years, so I kind of have some, at least working knowledge of some of the language that the fire department speaks in some realms. Part of my job for the state police is a lot to do with facilities and projects. I work at headquarters in Framingham, and we've got a vast variety of facilities from 200-year-old old houses to brand new facilities, mostly 200-year-old old houses. But for the town, I sort of started my foray into committees with the school building reuse, to see what we're going to do with the Mary D. Stone and the Julia Bancroft School. And then I got pulled into the Finance Committee as the chair of the Finance Committee, and as part of Finance, I came over for the Public Safety. I chaired that committee, which I don't think I was on 6 years, seems like a big number, but probably close to that component of so I know the backgrounds of this very well. I've lived in town for 52 years. Wow, it's a big number. Yeah, and just happy to be here to offer some insight and move this project along, hopefully.
Good evening. I'm Glenn Johnson. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief with the Auburn Fire Department. I've been with the Auburn Fire Department for 30 years. I also have a construction supervisor's license, unrestricted, and own my own LLC for the past 20 years. Look forward to moving this project on.
Good evening. My name's Alex Rozak. I've been a resident of Auburn for about 8 years now. Got 2 kids, one in kindergarten, one in preschool, so I'll be here a long time. I do commercial construction as a construction manager for Shawmut Design and Construction out of Boston. My career for the last 6 years has been, the first part of my 6 years was public education facilities, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. The last 3 or so years, I moved on to large projects, just finished a job at UMass Medical Center, so doing a lot of big projects with on the public scale, so hopefully I can bring that experience to the team here.
Good evening. Mark Imsey. Been a resident for 34 years now. I'm in construction. I'm a civil engineer. Do construction management work for the past 39 years now. Large commercial projects from high rises down to building smaller, multifamily units and everything else. So, in terms of the town, I've been I was on the high school building committee through it. Thankfully not to the period when we were having all the fights about what to do with the old school, but once we got on to really building, and then I was the chair for the middle school building project all the way through that on the school committee, or the building committee. Then most recently I was on the master plan rewrite committee that we just did, that was a couple of years ago, right? That, and one of the recommendations was, upgrading the fire stations and stuff, so looking to put my experience to use and value to the community.
Hi, I'm Robert Campbell. I've been in town for 45 years and brought my boys up here. I have 2 boys. They went through the whole school system, and they stayed. One stayed in town after he got married, and the other one's just over in Charlton. So we're locals. My background is when I got out of college, I went into public accounting, got my CPA. And I moved from that into industry. I spent the biggest part of my career at Babcock Power, which used to be Riley Stoker in Worcester. They build equipment and build and construct equipment for the power industry. So we had these giant 5-story, 6-story boilers and all the air pollution control equipment that went with it. And my job was to stay on top of the project managers for financial control, budgets, and forecasting. So I'm on the financial end of knowledge of things, but with that, brought a lot of contract reviews, negotiations with the other side through lawyers, lots of documents, and that's also, something you pick up along the way that's valuable in these kinds of situations. And I'm glad to be here, see what we can do.
Hi, my name is Greg Bowling. I've been in town almost 20 years now, surprisingly. Through a very circuitous route, I'm basically VP of Sales and Customer Success for a software company here in Massachusetts. But I've had my project management PMP certification since 2005. I got involved in the town 15-ish years ago as a town meeting member, and I've done that for about 15 years. And then the reason I was interested in this particular committee is that I was the chair of the Master Plan Committee that just about 5 years ago now sort of wrote the next 10 years of what we should be thinking about in Auburn. And I would say the fire facilities was probably, we didn't rank them, but it was probably number one on the list of a facility that was not appropriate for what we were trying to do. So when this opportunity presented itself, I asked to join. So.
My name is Tim Onderdonk. I've been an Auburn resident for 14 years now. I've been employed in the architecture field for 30 years. And when I saw the call for people to join the committee, I thought it would be a good idea to see what it's like on the other side of the table, on the public side. I do commercial work now. In the past, I've done some public work, such as schools and libraries. So I thought this committee would be a good chance to give back to Auburn and give my opinion if I can.
My name is, hello, this is on? Yep. Okay, my name is Joe Chanette. I'm a long-term town resident. My family's been in town for 4 generations. In my professional life, I worked for a major communication company where I was partially responsible for the design compliance, site certification, turn up and test on all communication aspects, and I'd like to offer what I can to this project.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, we have a wealth of knowledge around this table, and we're very thankful that you're all here. So I want to start off just talking a little bit about the site and what we're proposing to do, and then I want to talk a little bit about the space needs summary that we've done, sort of the different variations that's taken, and you know, Jeff can kind of weigh in on that. So as you all know, 10 Prospect Street, which is the old Chuck Steakhouse property, has been purchased for the purpose of the design and construction of the new fire station. So when you look at this, one more?
Thank you.
Yep. 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 When you look at this proposed layout, Prospect Street is on the right-hand side. The white building on the right corner is Park and Shop. So we're looking to site the facility basically right in the middle of Prospect Street. So the apparatus bays come out into the middle of Prospect Street, and then you would be able to make either a left or a right to a controlled intersection on either Southbridge or Washington Street. The space, you know, it allows for the adequate amount of parking based on the square footage. And then the area on the left where there's green space there, where you're kind of looking at the site where the current Chuck Steakhouse property is, there is enough square footage there that in the future, if the town decided that they wanted to construct and site a new police station, there is enough room for that building to go on this site. It will probably be a minimum of a 3-story building, probably a 3-story. The fire station is being proposed as a 2-story building, but in order to get the police station there, it would probably need to be 3 stories. But there is adequate space there. Again, you know, we're probably talking decades down the road potentially, but that is available for that. The fact that we abut next to the Veterans Memorial there, that afforded us the opportunity, in addition to the just shy of 3 acres that we purchased for Chuck's. The town owns that 1-acre parcel there. That afforded us the opportunity to use a little bit of that corner. For those who remember, maybe a decade ago, when the DPW was putting up, you know, the skating rink down there, that little skating rink. that afforded us the opportunity to kind of utilize that space where the skating rink was to be able to center the fire station onto Prospect Street. So this is essentially what we're looking at in terms of a test fit. And I'll pass around now the space needs assessment that was conducted, and this latest version has a November 23rd, 2023 date on it. But initially what happened 6 years ago when we started looking at the joint public safety facility, both police and fire did their own space needs assessment and said, okay, this is what we think we need for the operation today and the operation in the future. And what was different at that time when we first started the project was we were looking to do one joint facility. So we were looking to close both the Auburn Street and the West Street location, move into one building, which increased the square footage of what we needed. So when we ultimately made the decision that we were going to build a fire headquarters only and we were going to maintain Auburn Street as a substation, the square footage was obviously able to be peeled way back in terms of what the initial ask was on a single facility. So originally, when we first did the space needs assessment on the single facility, we were somewhere a little over 30,000 square feet. And you'll notice if you just, jump to the back page, we're just under 28. We're at like 27.9 on this. And the reason that we've peeled that back is because, myself, the deputy, Sean Steele, as he mentioned, he's in charge of facilities currently for the Fire Rescue Department. Over the past year, we've been touring fire stations around the state. We've been out to Millbury, we've been out to Northbridge, we've been out to Woburn. And every time we go out and we see a facility, we're able to kind of get the square footage perspective in like real time, right? You stand in a room that's, 200 square feet, and you say, oh, okay, well, this actually is a little bigger than I thought it was. Maybe we don't need that much. So over the course of the last year or so, we've been able to peel, a little over 3,000 square feet, back off the square footage. Once we physically get in there and we say, okay, this is way too big, for what we need, so we can peel this back. So we are very comfortable with the 27.9 number, as Glenn, my deputy, will tell you. We certainly want, to kind of go through the exercise and look at the space needs assessment. I'll just say that we, again, because we've been doing this for so many years, this 27.9 that we're at now, this is pulled back from about 31. I would just be concerned with pulling it back too much more beyond the 27.9, because now we're going to run into a situation that the manager mentioned where, and unfortunately, when you look at some of the municipal projects that have been built over many years, and this isn't unique to Auburn. Every municipality faces this, is that in order to fit within a budget number that works for everybody and is comfortable, sacrifices, need to be made. But we want to be very, very careful that we don't build a facility and then in 5 to 10 years we say, we've outgrown this space already. So there has to be an equal balance there. One thing that you will learn about, me and our department is, we're not very flashy. Our trucks are very simple. We're not a lot of bells and whistles on equipment. We have a very good approach to how we design things. If it does not have an operational function to what we're doing, we don't get that. So we are coming into this, facility. We need an appropriate sized facility that's built out of good materials that will have some longevity, that has easy maintenance. We're not looking to be flashy, but internally we want to make sure it has the correct operational pieces that we need in terms of clean rooms for hazardous materials, hot and cold, zones, adequate administrative space, adequate, bunk space and other types of things. So we have a general idea of what we're looking for. We want it to be as effective and as efficient as we can, and that doesn't That doesn't necessarily mean flashy. That's not who we are. But, you know, again, we want, our number one goals internally are the health and safety features that come with a modern fire station. Again, appropriately sized, just built with you know, good materials that will have some longevity with easy maintenance. That's it, right? Like that's sort of our starting point. And you know, we can take a look at this, and Jeff can kind of share a little detail in terms of how a space needs assessment is done, if you want to talk a little bit about that. So it's not in here, but so one of the things that I'll just mention, because it will be a topic of discussion, is, and this was mentioned at a Board of Selectmen's meeting, and it's something that this committee is going to have to sort of weigh in on and make a recommendation, is just because we cut the police station out of the project does not mean that the current police station doesn't have needs. They do. They have outgrown the building. You know, we've said this from the very beginning. You know, our fire stations are not falling down. Our police station is not falling down. The buildings in this community are well maintained, and we maintain the buildings. The spaces, for the most part, in really all of our municipal buildings, including schools, is space. We've outgrown the facilities. So in an effort to try to satisfy some of the space needs in the police department, one of the things that we are considering, although it is not in this needs assessment, is the possibility of building out a 911 communication center within this facility. As we've talked to Tecton, we have an area of where that would be. It would be located on the second floor. We're talking about, in this project, potentially dedicate some square footage to the project, but not construct it. Leave it unfinished. And at that time, the Board of Selectmen is going to have to make a decision as to whether or not they may want to consider a regional dispatch center. And if they were to consider a regional dispatch center, then the state would pay for the build-out of that 911 communication center with an estimated, you know, with an approximate cost of about $5 million between the construction and all of the equipment in it, IT, infrastructure, turnkey, at about $5 million. But the state would pay for that if the town, in fact, wanted to host a regional communication center. So this 27,900 square feet is for the fire rescue department alone. If we were to consider whether or not we wanted to include in the project square footage for the 911 center, that would up this square footage. But by doing that, it would give the opportunity for the 911 center to move out of the police station, which would give them some room to be able to program into their capital budget a reuse of that 911 space to kind of, you know, it's a Band-Aid, but it gives them the opportunity to at least expand slightly in their current footprint.
So just briefly about going through the needs assessment, we actually partner with a firm that was called Pacheco Ross Architects. There's a long-time friend of mine who was, their firm specialized in fire stations primarily. They do a little bit of police, but an enormous number of fire station facilities. So they were our partner at the beginning of this project. We're going back those 6 years. And they participated in the initial programming exercise. And basically that's a little bit of collecting data. We collect a lot of data about the existing apparatus and plans for future apparatus. And we go through and figure out what our apparatus base sizes are based on that current and future anticipation of vehicle turnover. But then there's also a series of interviews where Dennis Ross and a member from our team sat down and talked with at that time, both the police and the fire departments. and went through all of the kinds of space needs. And what we do in this exercise is, we're obviously making sure that we've got all of the rooms, all of the offices, all of the apparatus support spaces, all the transition zones covered. But we also build that from a functional standpoint. So in other words, we don't just say, we're going to give you an office of 250 square feet. Sorry, Chief. But we identify the furniture, the programmatic needs, the kinds of file storage, and we build the numbers up from the kinds of things that are described that go into those rooms. Over the course of this project, of course, we started out with a very big project, including all of the public safety. I think it was, last November from the date on this current program. Matt Sallad, one of my project managers, and I sat down and revisited that initial program with Chief Coleman. And of course, we separated out all of the police elements and then talked quite a bit about the remaining program elements related to the fire department. And of course, that's where that pare down exercise, a big piece of that was keeping the substation in play so that we didn't have quite as many apparatus space in this program as we did in the initial public safety program. But, all of that, like I said, all of that, we try to build the program, the square footage need based on what's actually going to happen in the room. There are things that we can do to be more effective with square footage as we go into design. Certainly we can activate more circulation space. I hate halls that don't accomplish anything. So if we can make them functional space, those are opportunities for savings. And then, of course, there's lots of things from the design standpoint, and I'm sure that we have all of the talent and experience here to give plenty of good guidance about materials and construction techniques that are going to help us along the way. I do think it is important to note that the very first fire station I did when I first moved to Connecticut, some 6 years ago, is a lot different from the fire stations we do today. There's been a lot of change in the fire service in the years that I've been doing fire stations. And the biggest issue is, as Chief Coleman already suggested, is the health issue. I've got one of the early fire stations I did down in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and we're actually building their substation right now. It's in construction. And just looking back between those two, you see a lot of the changes. Back in those days, we didn't think about what are the contaminants that the fire trucks are bringing back from the fire scene. We didn't think about, what are the contaminants that you're bringing back on your turnout gear. We didn't think a lot about the impact of PFAS, which is in all the waterproof coatings on your turnout gear. And, there's been a lot of data, and I think this is a growing issue. It's not a done issue, but there's a lot of awareness of the health risks associated with firefighting. And, right now, the NFPA standard says that you need to create a transition zone between the hot and the cold zones of the fire station. The hot zones being the places where you bring the trucks back, where you bring that turnout gear back, and the cold zones being the places where you live, where you work, your office spaces, where you have dinner and lunch, and where you sleep. And in that transition zone, you need to have a change in air pressure such that air from the hot zone doesn't migrate into the cold zone. So it's a vestibule, but it's also changes in air pressure. And you are required to have things like boot washes. You're supposed to have those handy wipes so that you can wipe down the areas on your body that come in the closest contact with that turnout gear. So for instance, the back of the neck, I automatically went for there when I showed that. That's one of those areas where you come into the closest contact and where you're sweating and where you have the most likelihood of absorbing those kinds of chemicals. And then they also have, hand wash areas and places where you can change your boots. And then the NFPA standard says, and then the firefighter should shower within the hour. That's what the standard says today. I can tell you there are a lot of departments nationally that are doing a lot more with this. I think finding the balance for your community is a big part of this exercise, and I think that the program, some of the program decisions already in place have sort of taken Auburn's stand on where they are with the transition zone. But that's worthy of some future discussion later on. Because, you know, there's the building it and there's the using it aspect. We can build a lot of fancy things for doing transition, for getting cleaned up, but if the firefighters aren't practically going to use it, then we're wasting money, and we don't want to do that either. But I do encourage you to think about that and keep that in mind as we talk about the differences between hot and cold zones and creating that transition space for firefighters returning. You know, we'll also talk a little bit about the decontamination procedures. You know, there's a lot of decontamination that happens right at the fire scene. So you begin decontaminating that gear before you even come back to the station, and then there's more decontamination that happens back at the station. So those are big issues worthy of discussion. And then, of course, there's all the gear that goes along with the apparatus. So you've not only got the room for the trucks, but so many fire stations you'll walk into today and you'll see the walls or every available niche just jammed with equipment. There's a lot of equipment that goes along with supporting the firefighter need. There's generators, there's chainsaws, there's jaws of life, there's all sorts of speedy dry and lots of different things. There's extra hose storage. There's the self-contained breathing apparatus, the space for cleaning and maintaining that gear. There's the storage of turnout gear, which is also another area that has changed with the increased awareness in health risk. And just to give you, I didn't give you any statistics. I've got a PowerPoint that maybe we'll look at later, where there are states right now where if a firefighter, full-time firefighter, contracts certain illnesses, it is presumptive that they got it from being a firefighter. And that means the liability for that comes back to the community. And that's huge expense. So we want to make sure that we're not burdening the community with liability. You know, on the police side, we always think about, you know, how do we mitigate the liability that the community bears? And the same thing is now true on the fire side as well. And all of that, and we haven't even got to the cold side of the building. So we do want to think about, you know, the challenges of being a firefighter and being away from your family and staying at the station for periods of times and making sure that we're contributing to a healthy, not only physical but mental health issues there, and that we're creating an appropriate space for that. And not to mention the right facilities in that kitchen you talked about. Over here, the chef side, we want to get that kitchen right. And of course, all the office workspace. And then the other big issue these days is training facilities. You'll see that in the program, there's a pretty good sized training room for making sure that the firefighters are all trained up on the best procedures and techniques. There's also some physical fitness training facilities in the program as well. So, you know, a lot of effort went into the initial creation of that, and of course, we revisited it a couple of times. And I suspect we'll talk about it one more time, just to make sure everybody understands and buys into what's in the program. I will say one more thing about programming. If you're worried about cost, the most powerful tool this committee, and we as architects and contractors probably know this just as well, the most powerful tool you have to manage cost, square footage. So I encourage you, when we talk about the program later on in a follow-up meeting, that you challenge us and make sure that we give you explanations that you're comfortable with, because square footage is king. You know, you can talk about making cheaper countertops, you can talk about cheaper materials on the outside, and those will save money, but square footage is the best way to save money. So make sure that you're buying the exact right square footage you need. That was all off the cuff, so.
Very, very good. So, you know, just to reiterate, as you know, as you look at this program, the station that we're looking to replace is Station 2 on West Street. And again, I know I had made this offer, but if there's anybody here who has not actually seen the inside of West Street or seen the conditions in there, I do encourage you to reach out to me so we can take a tour For the most part, 90% of the things that are in this program for the new building do not exist in the West Street Station, right? The West Street Station is a 1950s elementary school that was, and I use the word converted very loosely, in the mid-'80s. They appropriated $80,000. They put 3 bay doors in to put the trucks in, and that was it. There was no other money that went towards renovating or retrofitting that building to be a fire station. So we are essentially trying to fit square peg into a round hole every day, trying to, make a 2024 professional fire and EMS agency fit into the confines and the building of a 1950s elementary school. So over 90% of the things that are in this program do not exist in this current facility. I will tell you that, as the chief of department, and again, there's a lot of ancillary things that, make the operation, smooth and more effective and efficient. The things that I will be a champion of in this project are those that revolve around the health and safety of our members. That's my number one priority as the chief. I'm not speaking out of school when I say this, because the members know that I have said this publicly before. I'm not naming names, but in the last 3 years, we've had 4 members of the department in their 40s diagnosed with cancer. And we're not a big department. So statistically, to have 4 members in their 40s diagnosed with cancer in a department of our size, that's a statistic anomaly, right? Cancer prevention and the cancer problem in the fire service is real. It is the #1 killer of firefighters, followed by cardiac issues. So some people view, things like the fitness center in here as a luxury. In my mind, those are not luxury things. Those are the things that go towards keeping a physically fit firefighter, making sure that health and safety is at the forefront, of our members. There's certain statutory requirements. We're required to do physical ability testing, and we're required to do these certain things, and the health and safety of our members is extremely important. So again, like Jeff said, we encourage you to challenge us on the things that are in the program, but I can assure you, because it's just who I am, there's nothing in this program that I wouldn't die on that hill for, because all of what could be perceived as fluff or those other kind of things, they don't exist in this program. But I do encourage you to ask questions so we can provide answers, because we need all 13 members of this committee to be comfortable with this project and to be comfortable with the things that are in it. But those are the things that are extremely important to me.
Chief, just on the note relative to West Street, do you think we could just schedule a night to do that, only because it's been apparently a long time since I've been in there for a tour? And I will say to members of the committee that being on the committee, you'll have members of the public that will ask you questions, whether it's at town meetings or other places just around town. They're going to come and ask you questions, and if you haven't seen it firsthand, you're going to have a difficult time in really truly responding to those.
And that's a great point, Mr. Kennedy, because, and even since Greg and the master plan committee toured, there's been changes in that building, in the sense of, and a lot of people don't realize this, but that building, there's 10 full-time people that work out of that building, between on-duty firefighter EMTs, our fire prevention division runs out of that building, our emergency medical services coordinator works out of that building, our training division works out of that building, and within the last couple of years, the department now has a full-time fleet mechanic, and their garage is in West Street. So we haven't necessarily given up the bay, but every day, the rescue has to be pulled out of the bay so the mechanic can work. But if the mechanic has a vehicle that's up on a lift for a couple of days, the rescue sits outside with an extension cord plugged into it. So there's been, even since those tours have happened, There's a lot operationally that has changed. There's a lot going on in that building that I don't know that people actually understand really what's taken place in that space. So we can absolutely do that. I think once you kind of get the visual on it, it speaks for itself, but.
Yeah, so I would actually recommend that we do a tour both of West Street as well as the existing Fire HQ, because some of the things that are hosted there presumably will be moved to the new headquarters. And I would also actually recommend that we include a tour of the fire state or the police station as well, just so that everybody can just get a sense of, not to go too back in the history, we did think about originally as a public safety, and just to see some of the things that prompted that. I can, see in a design where if we're going to, maybe future down the road want to bring police onto that same site, maybe there's opportunities that there's some existing things like the size of the fitness center that might be a potential shared, facility down the road, or even, you got to drive over to the fire station or something. So I would really suggest we see all three public safety buildings, just to give everybody if you haven't been in there recently, give you an overview and a concept of like what's the current state of public safety in town. Because I think if you haven't done it recently, it certainly opened my eyes when we were doing the master plan of just, especially the West Street station, but like what we're actually using as a fire facility.
Absolutely. And even just on the police end, at a minimum, just to see the 911 communications room.
Yeah.
Because again, in 2000, when the station opened, there was one full-time dispatcher, working for the town. We now have 3 full-time dispatchers working out of a room that really was designed and scaled back at that time, to house one dispatcher. So the amount of monitors and IT technology that has exploded in that bit, like they have no more closet space because all the closets have been turned into IT spaces. So even just to see the 911 operation, I think it will bring tremendous value, to the committee, just as you ponder these decisions down the road. So that's a good suggestion, Ms. Kennedy.
How big is the department? How many full-time and part-time?
Sure. So the department employs a total of 52 full-time employees, including the chief and the deputy. So there are 44 members that are considered line firefighters. So we have 4 groups, and there are 11 firefighter EMTs or paramedics per group assigned between those 2 fire stations. So 7 members are assigned at headquarters, and 4 members are assigned to West Street. And out of each of those stations, they operate at a minimum an engine and an ambulance. But West Street houses the rescue. Headquarters houses the tower, ladder, scuba, some other specialty units, but it's split that way. 7 assigned at headquarters, 4 assigned at West Street. On top of that, we have 2 full-time fire prevention officers, our fire inspectors. One of those members is a fire protection engineer, so we do our own in-house engineering for plan review and those kind of things. And then there is our administrative assistant for the deputy and I works out of headquarters. And then there's administrative support at West Street for the fire prevention division. We have a full-time training officer, and we have a full-time emergency medical services coordinator, and the fleet mechanic, who, the fleet mechanic is technically a DPW employee, but they're assigned full-time and operates out of the West Street station. And the administrative support at West Street supports all of those functions: fire prevention, training, EMS, and fleet.
What a big department.
We are, we're a very busy, like I said, I've been in Auburn close to 20 years. Our call volume has more than doubled in the 20 years that I've been the chief. In the past, week alone, our average, call volume, Sean worked a shift last Saturday. They did 32 emergency calls on their 24-hour shift. The following day, that group did 28. The following day, that group did 26. Over the weekend, it was over 20 on both days. Again, we try to do a good job on social media and put out what we're doing and things, but I think that, some of the, Chief Bellhumer, you know, who was one of my mentors, was the chief for many, many years in town. You know, he used to say, you know, the term he used was, you know, it's not your grandfather's fire department anymore. And, you know, the town of Auburn alone, we have 1 million vehicles a day, including the Mass Turnpike, that pass through the town of Auburn. 80,000 of that is commercial truck traffic. You know, we have, you know, hotels and all of the other things that make us a little different and unique, you know, from some of our neighbors. You know, it's a busy department, and I don't know that everybody always gets the sense of what goes on a daily basis, but it's a busy place.
Question. Should we view the new building as additional space in addition to West Street, or are we going to demolish West Street or do something else with it?
So the plan is, again, everybody is in space needs. So the plan is we are not going to consider West Street as operational space for us. If this project is approved and built, our plan is to turn the building back over to the school department, and then the school department will then utilize that space for some of the space issues that they have.
One of the biggest things I've heard in discussion of all these things and in buildings in general is the long-term usage. And given the fact that currently there's one ongoing, at least 2 potentially starting soon, large apartment complexes, do we have some sort of forecast for how much increase in employees the fire department will need? Because like I said, I know that's always been one of the biggest complaints I've heard around town. I mean, I've only lived here 14 years, not nearly as long as a lot of people in this room, but everybody says that Auburn tends to build to the size we need now, not the size we need in the future.
Thank you for your question. I would agree with that statement, but I would also say that that's not just a town of Auburn problem. I mean, that's what most municipalities do, and I think Jeff will tell you the same thing, that's always the struggle. And you know, and I understand why it's done, right? Because at the end of the day, as Jeff said, like, you know, square footage is king, and that's ultimately what's going to produce the most savings in a project. And really what it comes down to is although people say, well, we know we could use more space, we just either can't afford more space, we don't want to pay for more space, whatever the reason be, that's how those projects wind getting trimmed down. So I don't, it's, you know, I also don't want people to think that that's just how the town of Auburn operates. That's pretty much standard across the board with really any municipality, right? Square footage is king, and we don't want to, sometimes we don't make necessarily the best decisions on that. And a good example of that is in 1964, when they built fire headquarters. Originally, when that was constructed, it was a single story. When you look at it now and you see the second floor addition that's just on the left side of the building, the reason that addition does not span the entire width of the fire station is in 1963, actually, when it was appropriated, the town opted not to spend the additional $3,000 that was going to allow the roof to be re-engineered with a larger steel to be able to carry a load above the apparatus floor. Now, today in 2024, you know, we look at that and we say, oh my God, like how could that decision even be made over $3,000 dollars? But again, the value of $3,000 then, I don't know what the equivalent is today, but those are decisions that are made, and it's, you know, I don't think that there's any, you know, usually there's no ill intent in that. It just comes down to the sharp pencil. But I agree, we have to somewhat strike a reasonable balance of providing some growth for the future without it being overkill. And there can be overkill, and that ultimately is what will kill a project as well. So we do have to manage the square footage. But I agree with you, and I think in this project, I think the square footage that's there is reasonable. I think it does provide us that growth. Again, the other thing that we have to take into consideration is we're not trying to get everything into one station. So the fact that we're going to move out of Auburn Street into this facility, Auburn Street will then become a substation, and really what can be considered a somewhat oversized substation, because that facility will then have greater square footage than is really required for a substation, but that will also provide us some of the growth opportunity moving down the road, whether it's vehicle storage or personnel or things like that. The question that you asked about staffing is, staffing, it's a number one issue. It's my number one issue every year. The department did have a staffing study back in 2022. The Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, town meeting, they've been very generous in trying to get us to what those staffing numbers are and what they should be by that report. I will say that, we are, the department today, we are understaffed for the call volume that we're doing. The question that's often asked to me is, well, how many more trucks will you need? Oh, you'll get a building, but now you need more trucks to fill it. We don't need more trucks. We need people to put in the trucks that we have now. I'm not going to say that over the next 50 years the town isn't going to get an additional vehicle or two, but it's not like, okay, we get this fire station and now we say we need 5 more fire trucks to put in it. We need people to put in the trucks. I see at some point with the growth in the West End, we should be, the town in future years, should be looking at what's called a quint, a combination of an engine and a small ladder, maybe a 70-foot ladder, something like that. But that could be as a replacement of an engine. But we are good equipment-wise. The issue is the people, and the issue is to make sure that the building is large enough to be able to accommodate those people, not necessarily, adding another half a dozen vehicles to the fleet. Does anybody have any initial questions just on some of the things that we talked about?
I guess I do for this. So with the general design of this, so I know like when his thing was getting to the police station, it's only 20 years old, they outgrew it. From a resident standpoint, that doesn't look healthy for your bottom line. So on this building, what is you're building this based on a what growth? 20-year, 30-year, 40-year plan? Like, I know it's hard to judge that, but what would be your basis for the size, your square footage? That is king for this, which is going to be the whole, we're talking, you're going to be around a $30 million budget for this property at 27,000 square feet.
Yep.
And then including the stuff that you're going to introduce to inside. I'm sure you're going to try to roll out some turnout gear and the wash machines and all that stuff into the budget with that stuff. So, it's probably going to creep up. What's your overall years based on that?
So that's a good question. Everybody kind of tends to shoot for, when they talk about the longevity of a building, the average number that people talk about is, 30 to 50 years. I think 30 is low. I think, right, you shoot for a 50-year building. But I also think about that realistically, and I say, well, the buildings that we're trying to replace now, although especially on the West Street side, could have been replaced a little sooner. The buildings that we're in now are, 62 and 70 plus years old. So I think in some respects, even 50 is a low number, providing that we're using, good materials, that have some longevity. I know, one of the things that, we've kind of talked with Tecton about is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I look at these types of projects, especially how expensive they are. 50 years does not seem like that long to me, although in reality it kind of goes by like that. I'm hoping that we're able to build a building that will last this community between 60 to 70 years, because realistically, that's the replacement schedule. That's what the replacement schedule is now for these facilities. And even when you look at the schools, it's the same thing. All the schools are over 60 years old. So, for me, I'm shooting for, material-wise, a 60 to 70-year building. And the way that these are designed, our bunk rooms right now are very small. Like, you walk in and, you walk in and like you close the door and you're just kind of in your space. And again, these rooms aren't huge. They're huge in comparison to what we have now, but we're talking about a 10 by 10 bedroom. And a 10 by 10 bedroom would allow you to then, if in the future, you could double up that bedroom. So we could essentially, let's say we had, and I forgot what's proposed, maybe 8 rooms, or there might be 12 rooms, 9?
9 bedrooms.
So 9. So in theory, you could double the staff and you could put 18 people in there. You know, the current headquarters has 7 bedrooms, but there's only going to be 4 working out of there right now. But you have the potential of 3 more employees down the road. So we've designed, you know, the square footage now where we have taken into consideration, and although we need additional staffing, you know, do I see the department doubling in size in the next 50 years? I don't. That's not realistic. But to go from 1 firefighter to 2 firefighters in a room, you know, if we had to, this 10 by 10 space allows us to do that.
So we just gave a presentation at the Station Design Conference out in Phoenix this year. We were talking a little bit about this very topic. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, there's a bunch of architects there that do public safety buildings and a bunch of fire chiefs and police chiefs that are interested in the projects. And it's a whole training endeavor. And one of the things that we talked a lot about amongst the architects is that, you know, designing a building for 100 years isn't hard. Designing a building to satisfy a program, the operational program for 100 years, that's hard. Because the use of buildings changes over time. You know, how old is this building? So 100-year buildings are easy, but how do you keep them functional over 100 years? And, you know, it's hard to say what the fire department program is going to look like in 50 years. You know, I think 25, 30 years we can make some pretty good guesses. But, you know, in one of the sessions during that whole seminar, they were talking about the future of firefighting. And, you know, they get the, you know, the sci-fi kind of thing going there where they're fighting fires with drones. Except it's not so sci-fi. It's happening today. God help us, we talked about the day that electric fire trucks come online. I'm terrified of that. Not because I'm afraid of electric vehicles, but I'm afraid of the risk of fire from electric vehicles in an apparatus bay. That scares the bejeebers out of me. That's something I'm not sure I'm ready to tackle. But, you know, those are the kinds of things that are reality in a 100-year lifespan, that the operations are going to change a lot. So I think some of the things that you can do to be really smart is think about what the next addition, where the next growth is going to happen, so that you can keep that building vibrant into the future. So, you know, I don't know, maybe 50 years from now you do need some additional space. There's some new regulation or some new job that you've taken on that you didn't used to have. So thinking about that, how do you make sure that you've got the opportunity to grow? I cannot tell you how many public safety buildings I visit, and they say it's time for a new building, and I look at it and say, geez, if we'd had a big enough site, we could just add on and, you know, and save this asset that you have. So thinking about where that future opportunity is, and then thinking about, you know, what changes the most in buildings these days? HVAC systems. Their lifespan is nowhere near as long as the brick and mortar. Thinking about the space that you provide for that and making sure that you have the ability to swap it out and change it. I told you I do police stations as well. I cannot tell you how many ranges I've seen that are storage rooms because all of the environmental requirements inside a shooting range changed, and there's no way to replace that great big air handling unit. So thinking about how do you make sure that the mechanical systems can keep up with the lifespan of the building. And then, you know, I think, you know, thinking about maintenance is the other big issue. You know, there are lots of inexpensive materials that make very nice buildings that don't last as long. So I'm sure all the builders in here can be a part of a vibrant discussion about where the right balance between upfront cost and value is. So I think look forward to that opportunity. Maybe you guys can teach me something too.
I got a question.
Yes.
Is there any non-negotiables with the design related to funding cost or for the land use or anything that we have to keep in mind as we have those discussions?
I'm not,
I don't think at this point the design is far enough along to have any non-negotiables. I think really the non-negotiables might come from the building program.
Okay.
You know, I think there are certain things where the chief is going to, and the department is going to come back and say, if we don't have, we don't have the right space for the apparatus, what are we doing? If we don't have the right space for the healthy transitions, what are we doing? So, the sketches you have in front of you, they're test fits or very, very early conceptual designs. I'm not married to anything here yet. We're not that far along yet.
so just to follow up on that, if you recall, we did have some conceptual designs done for the public safety building, the joint public safety building, that were released, so we had a floor plan, we had those things. We do not have that for this project because when we decided to switch gears and we were going with a fire station only, we do have money appropriated for those conceptual designs, but we put a pin in that until we got this group together. So right now, outside of this test fit that you have, we have a test fit and we have a program, and Jeff and Matt, internally, I think, have a conceptual design just sort of on how things lay out that we have not seen yet. But we put a pin in that until this committee was formed because we wanted this committee to have, sort of input and take a look at that and give your your expertise to that as well. So that's sort of actually moving forward. That's one of the next steps, is to get a test fit, not a test fit, get a conceptual design of a floor plan, potentially a building look, but those are all things we wanted your input on. So, but the money is appropriated to do that. Before we get into the conversation of the OPM, and we'll have a discussion on that, I just wanted to share with you two documents that I pulled up today, one that I worked on, and in my research, this first document that has the blue banner on the right side, this came from a presentation that was given to the Board of Selectmen in the town of Westwood. So Westwood is doing an expansion renovation of their fire headquarters. And this was recently presented to the board. And when I was looking at their slide, I printed it out because I thought it was just kind of good information for this committee to have, is it talks about the escalation rate. And when we started this discussion back in 2018, the square foot building cost was around $400, in 2018. And unfortunately, that's not where we are today. So this slide, basically just kind of has this, prior to 2020, the escalation rate, it was plus or minus around 3%. So everything above that red line was in that pre-2020, and you can see what the building square footage and what the cost per square foot was. And then everything below that red line is post-2020. And what they've seen on average, it was a 1% escalation in 20, it was 5% in 2021, it was 14% for 2022, and it was 7% in 2023. There is some, it depends on who you talk to. I've talked to a couple of people as of late, and they said that, they're seeing that escalation rate come down, but I've talked to some other chiefs that, they're still hanging on to $900 to $1,000 a square foot. In projects that are going on right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what this next year brings, especially with it being an election year and kind of what happens with that. But this just gives you a little snapshot in terms of what we're facing as far as escalation and cost per square foot. And then this other document, this is, and there are a few that I want to add to this. Actually, what I want to do is I want to take the stations that are on this list for local news stations, and I actually want to recreate this slide from Westwood, and I want to include these local towns into this slide. But these are some stations that already have approval and are being worked on now within the last year or two. And we've toured, with the exception of Northborough, because they don't necessarily have all their approvals, and Southbridge, they have conceptual designs, but they haven't gone out to bid. But anything that has had, like, physically been built, like Millbury and Northbridge and Woburn, we've physically visited those stations to see those, look at the layouts, look at the square footage, and we've learned something from every one of these buildings where we've come back and either said, wow, that we really overshot the square footage on that, we can pull back, or we said, wow, we really kind of undersold the square footage and maybe we got to go another 30 square feet bigger or something like that. But right now, you can just see in comparison our 27,900 square foot, Woburn, Southbridge, Northbridge, they're all in that 27 to 29. And the thing that I want you to take into consideration is, and sometimes when the public reads something in the paper, they automatically say, and I'll use Charlton as an example, they're right at the top of the list, they say, well, Charlton's building a fire station for 13,000 square feet. They are, but they're building a sub fire station that's going to have 2 firefighter EMTs working out of it. They're still maintaining their headquarters. So even though it's 13,000 square feet, it's still at a cost of $19 million. And the same thing with Millbury. Actually, a few committee members have reached out about either touring Millbury, and we can certainly do that. We can look at any station that's recently been built, whether it's local or whether it's an hour away. We can have access to any one of these stations. So we can go anywhere you want to go to look at whatever you want to look at. We can arrange that. But again, one of the things that I ask the committee to take into consideration as you look at other towns and what they've built is you have to look at the operation that's going on there, right? And Millbury is a good example. We've toured Millbury. It's a beautiful building, exterior, it looks nice, it's very good. But that's one of 4 fire stations in the town of Millbury. So when you look at their square footage, it's about 5,000 less than us, but it's a big building, but they're spreading resources to 3 additional buildings across. The other thing is the town of Millbury, outside its secretary, does not employ 1 full-time employee, including the chief. So this building was constructed with, when we talk about like the future, and again, it's a very nice building, but it doesn't have a lot of the things that we would be looking for or need and require based on the fact that the town of Millbury also does not run an EMS system. So the construction of it, the design of it, it's just different. It doesn't have a lot of the same program needs, whether that's technology, full-time employees, like, again, outside the secretary. And when you look at Millbury Station, the right side of the building, that's where the secretary works. They intentionally separated the administration from the actual fire station portion. So when you go over, so like they don't want that intermingling between the call firefighters and the administration where the secretary is. That's not a design we're looking for. We want somebody able to come through the front door, be greeted by the secretary, be greeted by the officer in charge, depending on what hour of the day it is. We're a staff 24-hour-a-day fire station. They do not have any employees in there. So it's sometimes easy to look at a specific building and say, well, they did it for this square footage, they did it for this amount. But it's the program and the operation that's critical, and that's just something that I would ask the committee to look at, is that, sometimes you're comparing an apple to a pineapple, and we just have to be very, very careful with that. But I thought this was just some helpful information just to kind of get a snapshot of what's going on locally as far as square footage and cost of what, what people are doing around. So I guess the next conversation we should probably have, and the manager and I spoke about this last week, and again, this is another topic that I think with the experience at this table, we certainly wanted your input on this discussion. But one of the decisions that I think the committee is going to be responsible for is bringing on or making the recommendation of an OPM into the project. So I think one of the things we need to have the conversation on tonight is whether or not it makes sense to bring on an OPM in this stage versus waiting until May, until we get approval for the project. And again, right, you could probably make an argument for both sides of that, but we're curious to hear what the committee has to say in terms of bringing an OPM on now to assist owner's project manager.
Something to say about that.
What's an OPM? I have no idea.
Project manager.
Again,
It's required by the state on any public project over $1.5 million.
They oversee the day-to-day.
Right.
There's usually a group of people on site, and they oversee the day-to-day, making sure it's being built the way it's supposed to be built. And
They're supposed to be the ones, they monitor the spec book, make sure everything's being done according to that stuff.
On the town's behalf.
On the town's
So
behalf.
that's
It's the town's project manager.
Right, so
They're looking out for your business.
whoever builds it's going to have their own project managers running the construction. The owner project manager represents the town and their
Okay,
interests.
I saw that, and I had no idea. Again, I apologize, I have no background in construction. I can break stuff really good, but I can't build anything. And if I could just make one statement before we get into this. I've been listening to all this, and it's a little bit overwhelming, but as the chief can attest, for me anyways, when I take on anything, I always put like 100% into it, and I always take it to heart. The one thing, we've been talking about square footage and money and all this other stuff, and it's, and how can we save the town money and all this other, I get that. I'm a town resident as well, so I don't want this project to become ridiculously priced and my taxes go up and I can't afford to live in town anymore. But I work for the Auburn Fire Department. There's a personal aspect to, we just don't, like with you, the other people that go to work and they work in an office and they go to that building, they're there for, whatever, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, and then they go home to their family, whatever. When we go to work, just to keep this in the back of your mind, we live at work. When we go there, we're actually living there. So, there's the, part of the, I was looking through all the square footage and everything. The health and wellness of our employees, it's, like the chief said, is paramount. And so as we move forward, where something you may think of well, do we really need as big of a fitness center? Yeah. I would actually think 1,000 square feet is probably a little bit less, but I think we should go bigger. But, there's parts of this project that it's very personal because we do live at work. I go to work with, they're not just my coworkers, they're my family. And so just when we're all deciding things, just keep in the back of your mind that there's a personal aspect. It's not just a town building. This is going to, potentially be my home for 48 hours a week, for, once it, if it gets built, once it's built and everything, for the remainder of my career here. So it's very personal to me to make sure that this project is to the standard of not just what we have, we as employees expect, but so in the future, future members of the fire department can be proud to call that home, because it truly is our home. Thank you.
I'm going to do two things. I'm just going to say one thing, to the statement you made about it being your home. One of the things that we've been facing a lot these days is, from a public safety standpoint, is recruitment and retention. And it is important to think about the quality of the facility that you're providing in order to get the right people. I go to little towns who, basically they're the training ground for people to move on to a better station. And that's a rough situation. OPMs. It's a little bit more than during construction. OPMs were originally put in place to protect communities, people like you, from bad guys like me. The reality is, architects, we have our agendas too. There's things that we've been trained to understand, and there's the way that we work in the industry. And the OPMs were put in place to be a bridge between committees like you and the professional design entities as well. They want to make sure that you understand all of the bidding regulations, all the requirements for working and building contracts with people like us, because, we do this every single day, write contracts, and a couple people over here had some contract experience.
Yep.
It's important. It's important. They know the rules. They understand what the laws say, and their job is to make sure you get a fair deal. I like to believe that we always give a fair deal to our clients because we work really great with a lot of different OPMs, and I also take a sort of a personal interest in building partnerships with not only our clients but our contractors. But that's where the OPM starts, and so it's important to have them before you're in construction. Yes, sir.
Jeff, I've been involved with OPMs when they worked for the A&E firm, when they worked for the construction, okay, and then when they worked for the customer, okay? And when they worked for the customer, it was always the best because they were independent of the design professionals, they were independent of the construction, because when they worked for the design professionals, there was never a bad design. When they worked for the contractor, there was never a piece of equipment that was put in incorrectly, okay? And when they were working for the customer as the owner's rep and been involved with the project from day one, okay, they were very much a part of the design compliance, because they would say to the customer, do you really want this, or you really don't need that. So they would talk about things that weren't necessarily in the expertise of the design professional or the contractor. So they would, and it's very important, because what you don't need is an OPM who says you got exactly what you asked for and it's not what you want. Okay, so it's very much important, okay, that they're part of the process.
So to go to the subject of when should we bring that in, I kind of wanted to ask Mark, when did we do that on the school buildings?
It was actually before we even engaged architects. Mass Building, they're prescriptive. You have to bring the OPM on first, and then go out to get the design professionals and stuff. With the high school, that wasn't the prescriptive, but the OPM was brought on early before, with the in the design and stuff. And it is, I'd be all for bringing them on as soon as possible.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff they can do. They can add to the, add to the whole system.
And then is the downside just cost, or when we pay for it, or just if we start now, we have to pay them a little more because it's going to last longer, or?
Yeah, so, as the manager will tell you, and I agree with this philosophy, we're always hesitant to spend money on a project that hasn't been approved. But when you're talking about something like an OPM, we also have to recognize that that position brings value to the pencil sharpening of the project that we're ultimately trying to bring to the voters. So, we don't want to spend, absorbent amounts of money without a project, but I think we do recognize as well what the OPM can bring to this early, in order to help this group and the architects kind of craft that. I had an opportunity to speak with an OPM today that worked on 2 of the projects that are on this list that were recently opened. And he gave me an estimate that we would be looking at about $100,000 to bring the OPM on to work from now until an ultimate vote in May. It would essentially be $75,000 for the OPM services, and then the other $25,000 is they would assist us in putting the bid documents together, so we have more of a realistic number to bring to town meeting instead of a guess.
It's not too bad.
I have a question on timelines. So we're hoping to bring this to a vote in May. At that point in May, will it be a full design? No. So after that, it gets approved, the vote gets approved. What is the timeline for bidding at that point? Because
that would...
When does the file sub-bids first go
Yeah.
out and this and that, right?
Yeah, when would the bidding process be?
So if your conception is not situated at that point, why would you need the OPM that much prior to it? I've done jobs, I did the Winchington Police Station, and I watched them, they had, the town fought for that police station, not to go into the old courthouse, blah, 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 like every town has the small stuff. And they ran out of OPM contractual money midway through the project. Now the town had to scramble, town that was nearly broke anyways, to find funds to finish paying it because they were required to have it contractually with the state. So I think bringing it on now would make it a little bit too soon. Maybe the May date or a hair before isn't awful, but bring it in for design, but for this, getting it approved, I think you're wasting $100,000.
I have another part of that, I'm sorry, before you go. How does the choice of, like, what OPM you're using, is there like a bidding process for OPMs? Okay. I've never been on this side before, so.
So what was said earlier, the law does require, when you get into the actual design phases, to have the OPM on board. For the initial study phases, which is where our contract lies, it's not required. Some towns do it, some do not. I think the other question you have to think about is the timing as well, because you've got to get funds for the OPM, correct?
So we do have a town meeting scheduled for November, middle of November. So the window is small, and we talked about the benefits of bringing on an OPM in the early stages that may offer some credibility when it's presented to town meeting, knowing that the numbers have been looked at, the pencil has been sharpened, so there is an asset to bringing him on early. I raised a concern about spending that amount of money, not knowing whether the project is going to get approved in May or not. That was my concern. But I think certainly we do have funds we believe that we can amend as a result of the commitment we made to purchase the property. We appropriated $4 million of free cash. The demo cost came in lower than we estimated, which will allow us to potentially seek an amendment of those funds that we could redirect towards an OPM for this project. So we value your opinion. There are two sides, there are two arguments to this, really. We are seeking your advice and your input on this as well.
So just a couple questions there. So any funding for an OPM would have to come from the next town meeting, or you said mid-November, so is that a special town meeting, or is there a, because
So
normally...
we have one opportunity for a supplemental appropriation before the recap is set.
Okay.
So once the recap is set, the only way you can appropriate funds is either through an available fund, because you can't use tax levy, the tax rate's already set, or we could possibly have a special town meeting and amend funds that have already been appropriated, such as the land acquisition.
Could we do that on the normal fall town meeting warrant yet?
That's.
Oh, that's in November,
Yeah.
that's the November, okay, because normally that's in October, I think, but...
So the reason it's not late October is because we have early voting, and the town clerk is going to be occupied for a 3-week period for the presidential election.
So then I guess the other thing that I would say is that town meeting has been relatively supportive of allocating funds for this process. So going back to the public safety, there was a allocation for design work or study and support the previous committee, obviously the purchase of the land as well. So I wouldn't be opposed to getting that on the November warrant for approval from town meeting, to say this is the next step, we need to get an OPM in to craft the, and whittle everything down to the right size, and to help us with that process. And then at what point you bring them on, now you're going to talk January probably, right before you'd actually get somebody contracted, so.
Another consideration that the chief and I discussed is the potential use of remaining ARPA funds. So we got about $5 million. We just appropriated roughly 1.4, which really commits the total amount of ARPA funds. but there are some current projects that came in under cost, and we may have roughly $200,000 to $300,000 available to recommit for another purpose. I just don't know if the timing is going to line up that would allow us to consider that, given the window we have for a fall town meeting. So if we do go the ARPA fund routes, it doesn't require a vote of town meeting. It just would require a vote of the Board of Selectmen.
I mean, for bringing an OPM on early, I mean, it's another set of eyes that looks into it. They're going to bring in an estimating function to it all that's separate from the architect's estimating. They're also going to bring in a lot of other knowledge and ideas that they may see that somebody else doesn't see about the site in terms of what's our impact with, MassDOT. We have, MassDOT on both sides. You have Route 12 on one side, you have 20 on the other side, and you're coming out on Prospect, but you're going right to two controlled intersections that are MassDOT intersections. There's some stuff that, maybe they get some insight that we can push to, get that through, or somebody else that help chase those channels, because those things do crop up and all this. And, we're all full-time people working away and everything, so we don't have it. And then, that's some valuable information out there from those type of people, and would help push, the ideas that are out there and solidify it and make you feel more comfortable with where the numbers are coming in, whether they're too high or too low, we'll never know until we get there. But, they'll help with that, understanding.
But that $100,000 only gets you till May, and then there's going to be all that on top during the construction. You're going to probably end up spending over $1 million on an OPM. You're so early in the stages, I don't think the money's useful at that stage. You don't even have a conceptual drawing, you just have a plot plan with a building drawn on it. I think we should bring it a little closer to something. I don't disagree with having an OPM. Having a third set of eyes is always great on things. 9 times out of 10, the OPM's already friends with the architect from another project to another anyways, so they have an internal relationship. So to them, actually to go against, to make sure that everything's in your best interest, isn't always what it seems, and bear that in mind, because it happens all the time. I'm sure you've worked with numerous of the same OPM on other projects. It's just how the world works. So thinking they're all necessarily on your side for this isn't always the case, so make sure you, I don't know, I look at it, get a little deeper before we bring in and spend the money for someone that's going to watch the rest, my opinion.
I think the timing of it can be discussed as to exactly when to bid and when they go on, but I do think in terms of credibility for us going before the voters, I think it's a big one, because if you take the term owners out and put taxpayers, property, project manager, it's their set of eyes. I think that's how you can sell it and envision it. It's not the chief who's looking for his best interest of his people and building the best facility for his equipment and his people, and it's not a bunch of folks who sat around at the table every Monday for 12 weeks and gave their best input. It's really sort of that independent, and I think it will give some credibility towards when we get to the vote, whatever the timing is.
I agree with on that end of it though, but the owner's PM is never going to go to the chief going, no, you can go smaller in that room. They're never going to say that. They're going to, whatever you want, they're going to give it to you, and they might give you more insight of it, and then they're probably going to add a little cost because of their knowledge of other things that maybe were slightly missed here and there, but they're never going to help him cut costs on that,
In reality, you could probably do the project without it, and it would probably go just fine.
No, I would never do it without, but I don't know.
It's truly that stamp that someone out there is going to vote, is going to go,
So I have a question and some comments. So I guess one, so you're saying you do not want a OPM at all before we were to take it to a vote in May?
I would...
Because here's the reality of what we need to vote on, is if we want to have the ability to hire an OPM at any point in time before May, we have to have it voted on at the November town meeting, because the next town meeting is not until May, and so it has to be voted on at that point to get the money. So if we think at any point in time before that election, we would have to put this forth for the November town meeting. It would have to be voted and approved. Once we have the money approved, do we have to immediately hire somebody? So we just can have the money allocated, then we can decide as a group at what point in time we want to hire that person, but it's vote, bid, start date, and if we don't vote on it in November, we don't get another shot until May.
I just realized we didn't answer part of your original question, when it would go to bid. I think the likely timeframe, if you get money in May, is that you would aim for it to be ready for a spring start. So we could be bidding January, maybe December. That's usually an advantageous timeframe to get a new project out to bid.
So we'd like to have the OPM probably at the 80% design review, okay, somewhere around there, okay, because we don't want to wait for the bid set, because then we're too late.
Normally, you have your OPM well before that, usually before design development.
Yeah, so all the design criteria, all of the wants that we want on our list, okay, or all the needs for the list are identified, because we don't want to have an incomplete design going out the door. So the OPM says, I gave you what you asked for, and it's not his fault that we didn't ask for everything.
So I don't think there's really a question if we want to, like you just said, we want to vote for it in November. The question would be more of when do we actually hire...
Need him to come on board.
Right.
The fact of the matter is,
Right, we have to vote for it.
We have 2 shots a year to
Yeah.
get the money for town meeting. So
May would be too late.
Or after the election in May.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we have to...
Even if you wanted to bring the OPM on in January, the money has to be appropriated in November.
Right.
So that's the time.
That was
Question I
maybe
have
my
on the money-
confusion there. I was like, I don't think we need him now, but
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
in January, February, yes, I do. He should be absolutely involved in the design process of it. He should be in the involvement through all of the bidding processes, because like on your file sub bids, I mean, you don't always get, the lowest bid gets the job as the contractor, but your subcontractors, the contractor actually gets to choose. They don't have to take the lowest bid. They can take the second bid if they choose to eat that money in their contract. So, the OPM has a good say in all that stuff and gives the insight to they know a lot of the contractors and which ones aren't, you might not want to take that low bid, there's like Griffin Electric, a lot of people don't like Griffin Electric and this and that going, they have a bad aura around them. The OPM, they'll tell you that going, this second guy or Mercer Electric might, you might have less problems with them than this or this and that. And that is where I think is a good thing for them, and then it's also watching the construction.
I want to make sure that I understood, that I heard you correctly, and maybe I didn't. Did you say that you don't believe that the OPM is going to save money on the project, reduce the cost of the project? Because that's the complete opposite of what I thought and think the OPM
personally don't
is.
feel it. I think the OPM is going to give you whatever you want. I mean, they'll give some input, but your design is this.
I'm talking, that's interesting because that's the complete opposite of what I've talked to several fire chiefs on here, and they're telling me that, the OPM has trimmed millions off of, yes.
Yeah.
Love to.
I lived it with the middle school, I lived it with the high school. The OPM played a lot. I mean, they had a ton of meetings with the school department. School department was asking for a lot of stuff, the teachers, and, they wanted a lot of space, and, they took it all in, the information and stuff, but then it was pared down to what was, the program needs and stuff, and working with the architect and stuff, and it wasn't, they were as hard on the architects as we were on the board and stuff, and trying to, pare down some of the numbers and stuff. I mean, I think, that project came in pretty well, but I mean, that's what they're there for. And if it's the relationship that we build with them, because they're working for us. They're not working for any, they're not working for any of the design team.
The Southbridge project alone, according to the fire chief, the OPM trimmed almost $4 million off the project of the Southbridge project. So it was interesting because it's the complete opposite of what I've always understood the OPM
Yeah, that's
to
a
be.
bad experience.
So I had a cost question on the OPM. Is that basically a fixed bid, so it doesn't, or if we hired them later in the process, would it cost us less because it's a shorter time frame, or?
So yes, I think the answer to that question would be yes, because the question that I asked him today was, let's say we brought you on now to May, right? So that's 8 months, so it was the 75 plus the 25. So yes, I would think that it would shrink if we were talking like a January to May. But the process for the OPM is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong over here, but we would need to go to bid. We would have to put an RFP together, a request for proposal. We would advertise to go out to bid. We would receive those bids, and then most likely we would bring in the OPMs, and this committee would interview the OPMs. and then this group would make a selection on who you wanted to hire, and then you would take a vote to hire an OPM firm after you've interviewed them.
So a realistic timeframe would be January. If we have to get funding approved in November, then we could have a bid ready to go right away, but by the time you have to give 30 days, 15 days on it, whatever, for the bid.
Realistically, with Thanksgiving.
And then you got Thanksgiving and holidays.
Christmas, all that stuff.
Yeah, to get the committee together to do interviews and then select one. I mean, you're talking January before the.
Yeah, I do have sample RFPs from these other projects that I've already started working on, so even prior to November, if the money was appropriated, or if we determine to do the ARPA route, whatever, the RFP will be done before November, so as soon as the money's appropriated, we could always go out to bid and start that process.
Would the remainder of the OPM's cost through the life of the project be rolled into the project?
Yes.
Thank you.
Would it be fair to say that no matter when we bring them on, whether it's January or say we kick it off till March, it's the same amount of work for the person? It's just maybe less time? So I think we're talking about savings that maybe isn't there. I think, it's still the same amount of work for that person. It's just less time. I mean, do they need to be at meetings between now and January? Probably not, because I don't think we're there yet. But no matter when we bring them on, it's still the same amount of work.
I would tend to agree that right now, it's probably too early. However, I don't think that January is too early. But one of the things I wanted to point out is, I also talked to some of my OPM friends. And, the pre-design is not their bread and butter. It's a little bit like, studies. It's not where we make money. We make money on projects. And, I polled around and said, what are you looking at for, pre-design? And, I heard anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a month. The variable in there is the scope that you ask. I heard somebody talking about the OPM bringing on estimating. That's going to drive costs. Because right now, on a conceptual design, I'm probably looking at anywhere, say in the $10,000 range for professional cost estimator to do an estimate. So if the OPM is going to carry a separate estimator on a conceptual design, then he's going to carry that $10,000. And then we're both going to have to carry a few more thousand because you have to go through a reconciliation. This is good stuff. I'm not criticizing. I just want you to understand that those are the things that will drive costs. If you're bringing the OPM to just advise you and, to make sure that you stay within the letter of the law and the process, you're probably looking at that lower end of $10,000 a month. If you ask for more scope, you're gonna do more. The real bulk of their work generally starts as we get into later design phases, as we get into design development and construction document phases. And particularly when you come close to the bidding, the OPMs do a tremendous amount of work as we approach bidding, especially if you cross the threshold of requiring pre-qualification. Because there's a lot of work that goes into pre-qualifying bidders for larger projects, and they do a lot of that and take a lot of load off of us that we have to charge for, and a lot of load off of you for work that you would have to do if you didn't have the OPM.
What's that threshold? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Apologize.
Matt would know this off the top of his head, and I don't.
What? What's the question?
What's the
The
threshold
threshold
for the
for
pre-qual?
pre-qual. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't want to gamble. Let me look it up.
All we're talking about is trying to get the vote over with the town. This is what I'm seeing from my point over here. We're going to hire an OPM at some point in time in the future. We're only going to bring it to the vote in November to give us the option as to when we decide to bring on the OPM. That's all we're doing. You got to get it done. You got to get the vote done, because the vote might not go your way. we're assuming we're going to get the vote, but you don't know that. If the town meeting members say no, then we've got to kick that stone ahead too. So I would say bring it to vote in November. Tell them we're getting into the design phase soon. We're going to make our minds up when he actually comes on, but he has to be here at some point in time for the project anyhow. We need this done.
Yeah, I think the importance is let's work the timeline backwards as well. So if you're going to go to town meeting to ask for the OPM money, they are going to want to understand the timeline, the vote in May. What am I voting on in May, right? And what has to happen before we get to that point? That's, I was on town meeting for 15 years. I understand if you don't go into those with a very clear explanation of what it is you're asking for, how it's going to be used, when it's going to be used, why we need it, then you're going to end up with 45 minutes of crazy questions and discussion and a lot of mess. And then you might get it shot down for no good reason, right? So I think that's what we should be looking at is, we need the OPM before May, probably. Is that the timeline, yes. Right? So in May, we're saying we have a conceptual design at that point, or no? What do we?
Well, so we have conceptual design money now.
Okay.
So really, this committee can start working with Tecton to start working those conceptual designs now.
So
then that's usually a 30 to 60 day process. So we will have conceptual designs realistically, by Thanksgiving.
Okay. So then what we're getting approved in May is, hey, we've got a design and this is what it's going to cost to build what we've all agreed we
Correct.
Want. And we need approval to fund the actual construction.
Correct.
When we do RFPs before that? Requests for proposals?
After the town meeting vote. With the request for
Talking about before May.
For the OPM, yes, not for
Yes.
anything else. If we go
We're
with
not going to
it.
go out with RFPs before May?
No, because I think May, you're going to only be, what, schematic design or?
Oh, no, are you asking about the OPM?
No.
He's talking about the whole thing.
Request for proposals for the building.
Yeah.
After,
Bidding.
for the-
Bidding.
yes.
Bidding will probably be early 2025.
Yeah, you
Late-
said January,
Yeah.
Yeah, late
So that's-
25, early 26.
Yeah.
so that's before May.
Well,
No, no, no,
Not this
no.
May.
No, late
No,
25, early 26.
Yeah.
If you get- if
I'm in the
you're-
wrong year?
If you're voting, if you're voting in May of 25 for the town to approve the project, then they're saying that you'd be bidding it out late that year or the early part of 26.
I just heard him say January for bids. I thought that's around the corner.
26.
So real quick and clarifying some things with Ed over here after watching a bunch of my wife's meeting, we can't have a vote because we don't have a chair or a vice chair, so we might as well table this until next week or next meeting, whenever that is, and we decide who the vice chair and the chair are, and then the first vote we'll have will be this.
Could we vote for a
Unless we
temporary
want to
chair?
dive into that tonight.
Could we vote for a temporary chair, just to have this vote done?
We wouldn't recommend that. We have time because the warrant doesn't close until late September. So conceivably, if you were to schedule a meeting 2 weeks from today, which is Monday, September 9th, and again, this is completely up to the committee on what night you want to meet, what time frame, that's a committee discussion. But conceivably, if you were to schedule a meeting 2 weeks from tonight, that would be Monday, September 9th, you could organize with the chair, the vice chair, all of those positions, and then we could set the agenda where you all are prepared to take some votes. So even if we didn't take an OPM vote for another 3 weeks, we still have time to get that on the fall town meeting for November.
Right up against the wall on it.
You're up against the wall, but we have some time. It doesn't need to be done tonight. But as the manager pointed out earlier, we can also put we'll put a placeholder on the town meeting and warrant, and we can always pull that. But we can put a placeholder there. So
just to throw this out there, I would be willing to volunteer to be either chair or vice chair if nobody else was looking to do it, if that helps.
You beat me to it, but
Yeah.
I'd throw my hat in the ring too. So I mean, I'm fine with going ahead with it. I've done it before. It's a lot of work, but I'm ready for it. If people want to move along, so we can then the next meeting vote and keep things going, that'd be great.
I'd like to do that.
So let me just answer the question that was asked earlier. I wanted to say 10 million, but it just seems so low to me these days since prices have escalated. It is in fact 10 million. So if you exceed $10 million, you must pre-qualify your bidders.
So looking out into September, the 9th does present some problems because this room is scheduled for a Board of Selectmen's meeting. So we try to hold this meeting, if we want to use this room, on the week that the board isn't meeting. And I think the warrant closes out on the 19th of September. So this room would be available on the 16th if Monday night seemed to work for everyone. And does 5:30 seem to work okay for everyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Make it work.
So the board, if they so desired, because there is an item on there to reorganize, if they wanted to establish a chair and a vice chair and take action on this item tonight, that's totally up to you. Or we can carry it over, organize on the, let's say the 16th, and then take the vote on the 16th.
I would leave
We
that
can get
up.
it done now.
Yeah, we've got, before Mark and Greg change their minds.
We got 2 suckers that can volunteer.
Yeah.
All right, if everyone's willing to do that, then I will ask for nominations for chair.
Can I self-nominate? I'm looking at Mark because I don't know if he wants to be chair or vice chair.
I don't have a problem being chair, if that's what it needs to be.
I'll nominate Mark to be chair, if he's willing to do it.
I am.
I'll second that nomination.
All in favor?
I-
All opposed? Mark? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you want to ask for nominations for vice chair?
I would entertain nominations for vice chair at the moment.
I'll nominate Greg Boland for vice chair.
I'll second that nomination.
Would you accept that?
I would.
Are there any other nominations? All right, all those in favor of Greg as the vice chair? Aye. All those opposed? That's a vote. Do we need to try to get the secretary and everything else right now, or? Yeah. I'd entertain a motion for for a secretary to be responsible for help with the meeting minutes. I think we probably have, I don't know if we have administrative help or not, but getting the agendas out and making sure. This is a quick description of what the secretary needs to be doing, right?
I think we can help out with the administrative aspect in terms of setting the agendas and things of that nature, but it'd be nice to have someone recording or taking the minutes.
Yep.
The town clerk will come after us looking for the town clerk will come after us looking for our meeting notes months after they've occurred, so.
And I guess personally, I would request somebody on the committee volunteer to do that. We did it without a secretary for the master plan committee, but it was difficult,
Brutal,
I think, and that was a much smaller group. But it was difficult to both run the meeting and try to keep the meeting notes at the same time, so. And you can always resign later if you don't like it, and we'll find somebody else.
I will say I've been intrigued. The town of Weston is using an AI tool to listen to the meetings, and it's gotten quite good. So they take turns being the clerk, and they insist that it makes the minutes a lot easier. I haven't tried it myself.
We use that on our sales calls and stuff at work, so it'll do a meeting summary.
So, is there any nomination? Are you volunteering? Somebody like?
I'll nominate Heather. I'm sorry, I'll make a nomination, Heather, to be secretary.
A second?
I'll second that nomination.
We have a second. Do we have any other nominations? Not being any, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? We have a vote. Is that all we need right now?
So now that you're organized, the committee may want to consider taking a position on the OPM.
Okay. I guess after all the discussions, we need to take decide what we want to do about the OPM, and put together a vote based on, I think, summarized, the topic is that, yes, we all want to go to the November town meeting, at least, to secure the funds, and then we'll decide from there when we want to actually bid and bring an OPM
I second
on.
that.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that if you support taking something to town meeting, it doesn't have to be dollar specific right now. Just express the intent. Let us work on coming
Okay.
up with a value. Certainly, this is a carrying cost to get us from point A until May, when it does go to a vote, hopefully to the voters of the community. At that point, the rest of that cost would be built into the cost estimate of the entire project.
I second that approach.
So what we need to vote on then as a motion, I suppose, is to, do you have it all mentally figured out? Because I think...
I would like to make a motion that we vote to put an amendment on the town meeting to allocate funds for the hiring of an OPM to be hired after the RFP is submitted and start at the time this committee decides at a later date.
Amend it to the November town meeting.
No, to be on the amendment for the November town meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have a motion and a second? Any discussions?
Mr. Chairman? So just as a point of information on where that money will come from, so as part of the allocation for 10 Prospect Street, outside of the purchase price, town meeting members appropriated $500,000 for the demolition, environmental, all of those things. Those bids came in considerably less than what we had anticipated. So the demolition, it came in at $180,000, and then we do have some associated environmental cost and wetland review and things like that. But I just off the top of my head, I don't even believe that we've reached the 50% mark of that. So the funds that we're talking about allocating for this purpose would be town meeting voting to amend that article to allow us to include the hiring of an OPM.
Excellent.
We can come up with the...
We'll come up with the language.
Okay.
I think everyone understands what we're attempting to do.
Are there any,
Fill those blanks.
Are there any questions about what we...
To the chair, how many town meeting members are there on this committee?
On this committee. 2?
I'm not anymore. I didn't run.
You didn't run?
I need a pause. I need a break from having to moderate.
He's got to be prepared to speak to this.
Well, I could speak in front of town meeting. I don't have a problem with that. I
No,
just
but it's
no
usually
longer...
reserved for town meeting members, though.
I can present. I can present, especially as, yeah.
No, I presented for the schools, and I wasn't on a town meeting.
And I presented for master plan and some of the things that we did from there, so.
We have a motion.
We have a motion and a second, and we had...
Amended and...
Yeah. Any other discussion on it? If everyone's willing, then, I take everybody that's in favor of the motion that's out there.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And we have a vote.
And Heather, you'll need to write that one down.
Exactly.
I didn't know I was starting today.
Yeah.
You're going to have to give me some, because I've never done
Yeah,
this before.
So I think the next thing we have to do is set our next meeting, correct?
Yeah. which,
the 16th is, it does Mondays work for people for the meetings at 5:30.
yeah.
I mean, Ed, are we limited to this room? Is there town administration that
So
duplicate
for the most
roles?
part, these rooms are programmed almost every night during the week for regulatory boards and other boards and committees. So by scheduling it on an off Monday when the board is not meeting, programs this room, makes it a little convenient. So that's why I said, does Mondays work for everybody at 5:30? Because that seems to be a good time to coordinate with this room.
What boards meet on Monday night in the planning board room? Because the other thing that we can do is, this configuration's a little odd. We might look to see if we can get everybody around the table at the planning board, or we're not limited to this room. We're kind of limited in space, but we could, if you wanted to, we could try to figure out whether or not the planning board room, but I don't know who meets in there on Mondays at 5:30.
It all depends the frequency of the meetings.
Right.
Boards and committees meet once a month, some meet every 2 weeks. So we'd have to look at the calendar.
Are we limited to cable access points, meaning the high school presentation rooms or the police station's room, or are we limited to only ones that are televised?
I think you're limited in more coverage. I think the school committee room will work, this room will work, planning board room will work. And soon to be, Camp Gleason will work, but that's still being worked on. So
Steakhouse in the town, too.
You don't want to meet in there.
Not wired up.
That's another option. We could check with the school department and see if they would be willing to allow us to use the school committee room, because the school committee does not meet on Mondays. But I don't know who meets in there, if anybody, but I could certainly check with the superintendent to
That would
see.
cover our tour as well.
That would cover part of the tour. So I can check with the superintendent tomorrow and see if that would be a possibility, and we
Why
can.
don't we agree on a tentative date on the 16th at 5:30?
Yep.
And then if it, for whatever reason, it becomes problematic, we can reach out to all of you and propose something else.
And the committee could also decide if on the 16th, just to kind of satisfy the room issue, we could post the meeting for headquarters, and then the meeting on the 16th, we could do the station stops on that night before it gets really cold and we're getting into the winter months. So we could plan on the tours on the 16th as well. We could just post it for the fire station. We'll start there, and then we'll do a little convoy around to the others. We could do that as well.
Okay. So, everybody in favor of meeting on the 16th of September 2024?
I have a question.
Yep.
Can we attend these through a Zoom meeting or something, or if we're not here?
Yes, this meeting was set up as a hybrid. We will continue to do hybrid meetings, so if you're unable to attend physically, you can participate remotely.
Be asking for that on the 16th. How do I go about that? I'll talk to you afterwards.
I'm sorry?
How do I go about getting set up for that?
So when you look at the agenda, there is a link that's posted.
Okay. Yep. Got it.
All right, so all those in favor of the next meeting on September 16th?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Vote. I think that's it for tonight, so take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.